The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Clarence House as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his red tunic one final time. 23 years of service to the British royal family had taught him that every detail mattered, from the precise angle of his bearskin hat to the spotless condition of his boots. Today felt different, though, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold. Marcus had joined the Queen's Guard straight from basic training, young and eager to serve the crown with unwavering loyalty. Over the years, he had witnessed countless ceremonies, state visits, and family gatherings. He had stood motionless for hours in scorching heat and freezing rain, never once breaking protocol. His record was spotless, his dedication unquestionable. Fellow guards often joked that Marcus was more reliable than Big Ben itself. The royal family had always commanded his deepest respect. He remembered the day he first met Queen Elizabeth II, how her gentle smile and genuine interest in his background had made him feel valued despite his humble origins. Prince Philip's sharp wit and military bearing had reminded him why he chose this path. Even during the turbulent times following Princess Diana's death, Marcus had remained steadfast in his duty, understanding that the institution was greater than any individual drama. When Prince Charles married Camilla Parker Bowles in 2005, Marcus had been among the guards selected for the ceremony. He approached the assignment with his usual professionalism, though he noticed the mixed reactions from both the public and within palace circles. Some staff members whispered doubts about the new Duchess of Cornwall, while others maintained diplomatic silence. Marcus kept his opinions to himself, focusing solely on his responsibilities. Over the years that followed, Marcus observed Camilla's gradual integration into royal life. She worked hard to win public acceptance, taking on numerous charitable causes and supporting her husband through challenging times. Marcus respected her efforts, even as he noticed certain behaviors that troubled him. There were moments when her treatment of palace staff seemed unnecessarily harsh, times when her demands appeared unreasonable given the circumstances. The incident that would change everything began on a crisp October morning during preparations for an important state dinner. Foreign dignitaries were expected, and every aspect of the event had been meticulously planned. Marcus was assigned to security detail for the main reception area, a position that required him to be alert to any potential threats while maintaining the ceremonial dignity expected of the Queen's Guard. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus noticed increased tension among the household staff. Whispered conversations stopped abruptly when senior officials passed by, and several of the younger servants appeared visibly distressed. He had learned to read these signs over the years, understanding that palace politics could be as complex as international diplomacy. The source of the tension became clear when Marcus overheard a heated exchange between Camilla and one of the senior housekeepers, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell. Mrs. Hartwell had served the royal family for over 30 years and was widely respected for her dedication and expertise. Marcus had always found her to be fair but firm, someone who maintained the highest standards while treating staff with dignity. From his position near the main staircase, Marcus could hear raised voices coming from the blue drawing room. Camilla's tone was sharp and demanding, clearly displeased with some aspect of the evening's arrangements. Mrs. Hartwell's responses were respectful but increasingly strained as she attempted to explain the constraints they were working within. The conversation escalated when Camilla accused Mrs. Hartwell of deliberate incompetence and suggested that perhaps she was too old to handle her responsibilities effectively. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he heard the cruel words. Mrs. Hartwell had been like a grandmother to many of the younger staff members, and her institutional knowledge was invaluable to the smooth operation of royal events. What happened next would be seared into Marcus's memory forever. Mrs. Hartwell, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion, quietly explained that she had been working since 5 in the morning to ensure every detail was perfect for the state dinner. She mentioned that her arthritis was causing her pain, but she had pushed through because she understood the importance of the evening. Instead of showing compassion, Camilla's response was to threaten Mrs. Hartwell's position, suggesting that perhaps it was time for new blood in the household staff. The cruelty in her voice was unmistakable, and Marcus watched through the doorway as the elderly woman's shoulders sagged under the verbal assault. This was not the first time Marcus had witnessed such behavior from Camilla. Over recent months, he had noticed a pattern of harsh treatment toward staff members who couldn't defend themselves. There had been the incident with young James, a new footman who had accidentally served tea from the wrong side during a private luncheon. Camilla's public humiliation of the boy had been so severe that he had resigned the following day. There was also the matter of Sarah, a housemaid who had been brought to tears after Camilla criticized her accent during a staff briefing. The young woman had worked hard to improve her speech, but Camilla's comments had been both personal and unnecessary. Marcus had seen Sarah practicing her pronunciation during her breaks, determined to meet the Duchess's expectations despite the humiliation. As Marcus stood there listening to Mrs. Hartwell being berated, something inside him snapped. 23 years of military discipline and royal protocol warred with his basic sense of human decency. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family. But what did that mean when one member was systematically undermining the very people who served them with dedication and loyalty? The breaking point came when Camilla demanded that Mrs. Hartwell apologize for her incompetence and promise to do better in the future. The proud woman who had served the crown with distinction for 3 decades was being forced to grovel for the sake of keeping her position. Marcus could see tears beginning to form in Mrs. Hartwell's eyes as she struggled to maintain her composure. Without fully considering the consequences, Marcus stepped forward into the doorway. The sound of his boots on the polished floor echoed through the room, causing both women to turn toward him. Camilla's expression immediately shifted from anger to surprise, clearly not expecting to be interrupted during what she assumed was a private conversation. "Your Royal Highness," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. Perhaps this matter could be addressed at a more appropriate time, given the preparations still required for this evening's dinner. Camilla's eyes narrowed as she processed the interruption. In 23 years of service, Marcus had never once spoken unless directly addressed by a member of the royal family. His intervention was not only unexpected but represented a clear violation of established protocol. "Sergeant Thompson," Camilla replied, her voice cold and measured. "I don't recall requesting your opinion on household management matters." Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He could step back now, apologize for the interruption, and return to his post. His career would likely survive such a minor breach of protocol. But as he looked at Mrs. Hartwell's grateful expression and thought about all the other staff members who had suffered similar treatment, he made a decision that would change his life forever. "With respect, Your Royal Highness," Marcus continued, "Mrs. Hartwell has served this household with distinction for 30 years. Her expertise and dedication have been instrumental in maintaining the standards expected for royal events. Perhaps her experience should be valued rather than questioned." The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla's face flushed with anger as she realized that a mere guard was not only contradicting her, but doing so in front of a staff member she had been disciplining. Mrs. Hartwell looked between the two of them, clearly understanding the significance of what was happening, but powerless to intervene. "How dare you presume to lecture me on the value of staff members," Camilla said, her voice rising. "Your job is to stand at attention and follow orders, not to involve yourself in matters that are far above your station." Marcus felt a calm settle over him as he realized there was no going back. "My job is to serve the crown and protect the dignity of the royal family," he replied quietly. "Sometimes that means protecting those who serve the crown with equal dedication." The confrontation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Prince Charles appeared in the doorway, clearly having heard the raised voices from his nearby study. His expression was puzzled as he took in the unusual scene, his wife facing off against one of the guards while Mrs. Hartwell stood frozen between them. "What's happening here?" Charles asked, his tone conveying both concern and confusion. Camilla was quick to respond, her voice taking on a different tone as she addressed her husband. "This guard has forgotten his place and is interfering in household management. He needs to be disciplined immediately for his insubordination." Marcus straightened his posture and looked directly at Prince Charles. "Sir, I was simply expressing concern for Mrs. Hartwell's well-being and acknowledging her years of faithful service to the crown." Charles looked between his wife and the guard, clearly trying to understand the full context of the situation. Mrs. Hartwell, still trembling slightly, curtsied and attempted to excuse herself, but Charles gestured for her to remain. "Mrs. Hartwell," Charles said gently, "are you quite all right?" The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears as she struggled to respond diplomatically. "Yes, sir. We were simply discussing the arrangements for tonight's dinner." Charles's experienced eye caught the signs of distress that Mrs. Hartwell was trying to hide. He had always prided himself on maintaining positive relationships with the palace staff, understanding that their loyalty and expertise were essential to the functioning of the monarchy. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to collect ourselves," Charles suggested diplomatically. "Mrs. Hartwell, Please ensure that you have whatever support you need for this evening's preparations. Sergeant Thompson, please remain here for a moment. As Mrs. Hartwell curtsied and left the room, Marcus braced himself for the consequences of his actions. He had broken one of the most fundamental rules of royal service by inserting himself into a conflict between family members and staff. The military discipline that had guided his entire adult life told him he should have remained silent, but his conscience told him he had done the right thing. Camilla's anger was palpable as she waited for her husband to address the situation. Charles, this man has shown complete disrespect for my authority and position. He cannot be allowed to remain in service after such blatant insubordination. Charles studied Marcus for a long moment before responding. Sergeant Thompson, your service record is exemplary. In 23 years, you've never once been disciplined for any breach of protocol. What made today different? Marcus chose his words carefully, knowing that his answer would likely determine his future. Sir, I have always believed that serving the crown means upholding the values it represents. Those values include treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their position in society. The implications of Marcus's words were clear to everyone in the room. He was suggesting that Camilla's treatment of Mrs. Hartwell fell short of those standards, a criticism that would normally be unthinkable coming from someone in his position. Camilla's face darkened further. Charles, are you going to allow this man to insult me in my own home? His behavior is absolutely unacceptable. Charles found himself in an impossible position. His wife was demanding action against a guard who had served the family faithfully for over 2 decades. Yet he couldn't ignore the possibility that Marcus's intervention was motivated by legitimate concerns about staff treatment. The tension in the room was thick as Charles weighed his options. Marcus stood at attention, prepared to accept whatever consequences followed from his decision to speak out. He thought about his wife Sarah and their 2 children, wondering how his actions might affect their financial security. But he also thought about Mrs. Hartwell and all the other staff members who had no voice in defending themselves against unreasonable treatment. As the 3 of them stood in the blue drawing room, none of them could have imagined how this confrontation would ripple through the palace, eventually reaching the highest levels of the royal family and fundamentally changing the dynamics of royal service. Marcus had crossed a line that had never been crossed before, and there would be no going back. The aftermath of Marcus's confrontation with Camilla spread through Clarence House like wildfire. Within hours, every staff member from the head butler to the newest kitchen assistant knew that Sergeant Thompson had done something unprecedented. The exact details varied depending on who was telling the story, but everyone agreed that a guard had actually stood up to the Duchess of Cornwall in defense of Mrs. Hartwell. Prince Charles had ultimately decided to postpone any immediate disciplinary action, choosing instead to conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. This decision infuriated Camilla, who saw it as undermining her authority and position within the household. She had expected immediate support from her husband and swift punishment for Marcus's insubordination. Marcus spent the evening of the state dinner at his regular post, though he noticed the curious glances and whispered conversations among the other guards. His friend and fellow sergeant, David Mitchell, managed to catch his attention during a brief break between duties. Marcus, what were you thinking? David asked quietly as they stood in a secluded corridor. In all my years here, I've never heard of a guard challenging a royal like that. You could lose everything. Marcus had been asking himself the same question throughout the evening. I couldn't just stand there and watch her humiliate Mrs. Hartwell, he replied. That woman has given her life to this family. She deserves better treatment than that. David shook his head in disbelief. But there are proper channels for these things. You could have reported it to the equerry or the master of the household. Now you've put yourself directly in the firing line. The proper channels haven't been working, Marcus said firmly. How many good people have we lost over the past year because of her behavior? James, Sarah, and don't forget about Robert in the kitchen who quit after she screamed at him for using the wrong serving spoons. David couldn't argue with that assessment. They had both witnessed the steady turnover in palace staff since Camilla had become more involved in household management. Experienced servants who had served the family for years were leaving, often without explanation, but with obvious distress. The state dinner proceeded smoothly, thanks largely to Mrs. Hartwell's expertise and the professionalism of the remaining staff. Marcus noticed that the elderly housekeeper seemed to have regained some of her composure, though she still appeared somewhat shaken by the earlier confrontation. Several of the younger staff members made a point of offering her extra assistance throughout the evening. Word of the incident had also reached other members of the royal family. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach and direct communication style, made an unexpected visit to Clarence's house the following morning. Her presence caused considerable speculation among the staff, as unscheduled visits from senior royals were rare and usually signified important developments. Marcus was surprised when he was summoned to meet with Princess Anne in the private secretary's office. He had encountered her numerous times during official events, but had never spoken with her directly. Her reputation for straight-talking and fairness gave him hope that she might understand his position. Sergeant Thompson, Princess Anne began without preamble. I understand there was an incident yesterday that has caused quite a stir. I'd like to hear your version of events. Marcus recounted the confrontation honestly, explaining his growing concerns about staff treatment and his decision to intervene on Mrs. Hartwell's behalf. Princess Anne listened without interruption, her expression remaining neutral throughout his account. You realize that what you did goes against centuries of protocol, she said when he finished. The royal family's authority depends on clear hierarchies and unquestioned loyalty from those who serve us. I understand that completely, Your Royal Highness, Marcus replied. But I also believe that true loyalty sometimes requires protecting the institution from actions that might damage its reputation or values. Princess Anne studied him for a long moment. You're suggesting that my brother's wife was damaging the institution? Marcus chose his words carefully. I'm suggesting that treating loyal staff members with cruelty and disrespect is inconsistent with the values the royal family represents. Mrs. Hartwell has served with distinction for 30 years. She deserved better. And you appointed yourself as her protector? I appointed myself as someone who couldn't stand by and watch injustice, regardless of who was committing it. Princess Anne's expression softened slightly. That's either very brave or very foolish, Sergeant. Possibly both. She paused, then continued. Tell me about the other incidents you mentioned. Marcus detailed the various episodes he had witnessed over the past year, being careful to stick to facts rather than interpretations. He described James's humiliation and subsequent resignation, Sarah's tears after being criticized for her accent, and Robert's departure from the kitchen staff following a particularly harsh verbal assault. These incidents have created a climate of fear among the household staff, Marcus concluded. Good people are leaving, and those who remain are walking on eggshells. It's not sustainable, and it's not right. Princess Anne took notes throughout his account, asking occasional clarifying questions. Her methodical approach suggested that she was taking his concerns seriously, which gave Marcus cautious optimism about the outcome. I'll need to verify these accounts with other staff members, she said finally. In the meantime, you're to continue your regular duties, but report directly to me if there are any further incidents. Is that understood? Yes, Your Royal Highness. Thank you for listening. As Marcus left the meeting, he felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Princess Anne's involvement suggested that his concerns were being taken seriously at the highest levels, but he knew that Camilla would not appreciate having her behavior scrutinized by other family members. That afternoon, word reached Marcus that several staff members had been interviewed about their experiences with the Duchess of Cornwall. The interviews were conducted discreetly by Princess Anne's private secretary, but the message was clear that the royal family was taking the situation seriously. Mrs. Hartwell was among those interviewed, and Marcus later learned that she had spoken honestly about her experiences while maintaining her characteristic dignity and professionalism. Other staff members, initially hesitant to speak critically about a senior royal, gradually opened up about their concerns when assured that their comments would be treated confidentially. The investigation revealed a troubling pattern of behavior that went beyond the isolated incidents Marcus had witnessed. Several long-serving staff members reported feeling demoralized and undervalued, with some actively considering resignation despite their dedication to the institution. Meanwhile, Camilla's reaction to the investigation was swift and angry. She complained to Prince Charles that she was being unfairly scrutinized based on the word of disgruntled servants and an insubordinate guard. She argued that maintaining standards required firm management and that the staff needed to understand their place in the hierarchy. Prince Charles found himself caught between his wife's anger and mounting evidence that there were legitimate concerns about household management. His own interactions with the staff had always been positive, but he realized that he might not have been fully aware of what was happening when he wasn't present. The situation became more complicated when Queen Elizabeth II was briefed on the investigation. Despite her advanced age, the Queen remained sharp and deeply concerned about the welfare of palace staff, many of whom had served the royal family for decades. She had always prided herself on maintaining high standards while treating everyone with dignity and respect. Marcus was summoned for another meeting, this time with the Queen's private secretary, Sir Edward Pemberton. The formal nature of the summons made it clear that his actions had reached the highest levels of royal attention. Sergeant Thompson, Sir Edward began. Her Majesty is aware of the recent events and your role in bringing certain concerns to light. She wishes me to convey that while your breach of protocol was serious, she appreciates your dedication to protecting the welfare of palace staff. Marcus felt a surge of relief mixed with continued anxiety about his future. Thank you, sir. I hope I haven't caused unnecessary difficulties for the family. The difficulties you've highlighted were already present, Sir Edward replied diplomatically. Your actions have simply forced us to address them directly. The question now is how to proceed in a way that upholds both proper protocol and appropriate standards of staff treatment. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Sir Edward explaining the complexities of royal household management and the delicate balance required between authority and compassion. Marcus gained a deeper appreciation for the challenges faced by senior royals in managing large staffs while maintaining public confidence in the institution. As the investigation continued, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the household atmosphere. Staff members seemed more relaxed, and there was less of the tension that had become commonplace in recent months. Some of the younger servants even dared to smile and engage in light conversation during their duties. Mrs. Hartwell, in particular, appeared to have regained much of her confidence and authority. She resumed her usual role as the backbone of household operations, organizing younger staff members and ensuring that everything ran smoothly despite the ongoing investigation. The turning point came when Princess Anne presented her findings to a private family meeting that included the Queen, Prince Charles, and Camilla. Marcus was not present for this discussion, but he later learned that it had been tense and difficult, with clear disagreements about how to address the situation. The outcome of that meeting would determine not only Marcus's future, but also set important precedents for how the royal family handled internal conflicts and staff welfare. For the first time in his career, Marcus had challenged the established order, and everyone was waiting to see what consequences would follow. In the days following the family meeting, speculation among the staff reached fever pitch. Some believed that Marcus would be quietly transferred to another royal household or encouraged to take early retirement. Others thought that the investigation might lead to significant changes in household management procedures. Marcus himself tried to maintain his normal routine while preparing for whatever decision had been made about his future. He had no regrets about defending Mrs. Hartwell, but he was acutely aware that his actions had created a crisis that extended far beyond a simple breach of protocol. The resolution, when it came, would surprise everyone involved and establish new standards for how the royal family balanced authority with accountability. Marcus's moment of moral courage had opened a door that could never be completely closed again, fundamentally changing the relationship between the royals and those who served them. The family meeting that would determine Marcus's fate took place in the Queen's private study at Buckingham Palace on a gray November morning. The room, lined with portraits of previous monarchs and filled with the weight of centuries of royal tradition, had witnessed countless crucial decisions that shaped the monarchy's future. Today's discussion would prove to be equally significant. Queen Elizabeth II, despite being in her late 90s, remained mentally sharp and deeply invested in the welfare of her household staff. She had spent the morning reviewing Princess Anne's detailed report and the testimony from various staff members. The pattern of behavior described in the documents troubled her greatly, as it contradicted the values she had worked to instill throughout her reign. Prince Charles arrived first, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but understanding its gravity. He had spent sleepless nights trying to reconcile his loyalty to his wife with the mounting evidence of problematic behavior toward palace staff. The man who would soon inherit the throne was learning that kingship sometimes required making difficult decisions that pleased no one. Princess Anne entered with her characteristic directness, carrying a folder containing additional documentation she had gathered since their last discussion. Her investigation had been thorough and professional, conducted with the same attention to detail she brought to all her royal duties. Camilla was the last to arrive, her posture defensive and her expression clearly indicating her displeasure with the entire process. She viewed the investigation as an attack on her position and authority, orchestrated by disloyal staff members and enabled by a guard who had forgotten his place. Before we begin, the Queen said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of 7 decades on the throne. I want everyone to understand that we are here to address serious concerns about household management and staff welfare. This is not about assigning blame, but about ensuring that our standards reflect the values we represent. Princess and opened her folder and began presenting her findings methodically. She had interviewed 37 staff members across different departments, from senior household officials to junior servants. The pattern that emerged was consistent and troubling. A significant decline in morale since Camilla had assumed greater involvement in household management. Mrs. Hartwell's experience was not isolated and reported. I documented 17 separate incidents over the past 18 months where staff members were subjected to what can only be described as verbal abuse. 7 experienced servants have resigned during this period, citing hostile working conditions. Camilla interrupted sharply. These people are being paid to do a job. If they can't handle firm management and high standards, perhaps they shouldn't be working for the royal family. The Queen's expression remained neutral, but those who knew her well could detect the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated disapproval. Maintaining high standards and treating people with dignity are not mutually exclusive, she said calmly. The staff who serve us deserve our respect, not our contempt. Charles shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Camilla, perhaps we could have handled some of these situations differently. The staff's loyalty and experience are valuable assets that shouldn't be dismissed lightly. Are you taking their side against me? Camilla demanded, her composure beginning to crack. I'm trying to bring some order and efficiency to a household that has become far too casual and familiar. These servants need to remember their place. Princess and looked up from her notes. Their place is as valued members of the royal household who have dedicated their lives to serving the crown. Mrs. Hartwell, for example, has worked for us longer than some family members have been alive. She deserves better than to be humiliated in front of her colleagues. That woman is too old and set in her ways, Camilla shot back. She needs to adapt or step aside for younger, more capable staff. The Queen's voice, when she spoke, was quiet but carried unmistakable authority. Mrs. Hartwell has served this family with distinction since before you were part of it. Her experience and institutional knowledge are irreplaceable. The fact that a guard felt compelled to defend her should tell us something important about the situation. This brought the conversation back to Marcus Thompson, whose actions had precipitated the entire crisis. Charles had been hoping to avoid discussing the guard's breach of protocol, but it was impossible to ignore the catalyst for their current predicament. Sergeant Thompson violated fundamental rules of royal service, Charles said carefully. Regardless of his motivations, he cannot be allowed to question the authority of senior royals without consequences. His motivations were protecting a loyal servant from unfair treatment, the Queen replied. In my experience, people don't risk their careers lightly. The fact that he was willing to sacrifice his position suggests that he viewed the situation as serious enough to warrant intervention. Princess and added her own perspective. I've reviewed Thompson's service record extensively. 23 years without a single disciplinary action. Commendations for bravery, dedication, and professionalism. This isn't someone who acts rashly or disrespectfully. His intervention was completely out of character, which makes it more significant, not less. Camilla's frustration was evident. So you're all going to support insubordination because it came from someone with a good record? What kind of precedent does that set for other staff members? The precedent it sets, the Queen said firmly, is that we value moral courage and the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. Those are values worth supporting. The discussion continued for over 2 hours, with various options being explored for addressing both Marcus's breach of protocol and the underlying staff management issues. Camilla argued for severe disciplinary action against the guard, while Princess advocated for recognition of his moral courage. Charles found himself trying to find a middle ground that would satisfy no one. During a brief break, the Queen requested a private word with Prince Charles. Mother and son stepped into an adjacent sitting room where they could speak freely about the difficult family dynamics at play. Charles, the Queen said gently, I understand your position is difficult. Loyalty to one's spouse is admirable, but it cannot come at the expense of justice and fairness to others. I know, Mama, Charles replied, using the childhood name that revealed his emotional state. But if I don't support Camilla in this, it undermines her position in the family and the household. She's already struggling with public acceptance. Public acceptance cannot be built on the suffering of palace staff, the Queen observed. The monarchy's strength comes from the loyalty and dedication of those who serve us. If we lose that through poor treatment, we lose something far more valuable than temporary family harmony. When they returned to the main meeting, the queen had clearly reached a decision. Her experience and wisdom had guided the monarchy through countless crises, and she approached this situation with the same careful consideration she had applied to matters of state. I have decided on the following course of action, she announced. Sergeant Thompson will receive a formal reprimand for breach of protocol, but he will remain in service and receive a commendation for moral courage. This sends the message that while proper channels must be respected, the protection of staff welfare is valued. Camilla's face darkened. You're rewarding his insubordination. I'm acknowledging that sometimes doing the right thing requires difficult choices, the queen replied. As for household management, there will be immediate changes to ensure that all staff members are treated with appropriate dignity and respect. Princess Anne was designated to oversee these changes, working with the master of the household to establish new protocols for staff management. Regular reviews would be conducted to ensure that working conditions remain positive and that any concerns could be addressed through proper channels before they escalated to crisis points. Additionally, the queen continued, Mrs. Hartwell will be offered a new position as senior household advisor, recognizing her expertise and providing her with additional authority to advocate for staff welfare. The meeting concluded with clear instructions for all parties. Charles would work with his wife to modify her approach to household management. Princess Anne would oversee the implementation of new protocols, and Marcus would receive both discipline and recognition for his actions. As the family members dispersed, each carried different emotions about the outcome. The queen felt satisfied that justice had been served while maintaining institutional stability. Princess Anne was pleased that the staff concerns had been addressed comprehensively. Charles remained concerned about the impact on his marriage and household harmony. Camilla left the palace angry and feeling unsupported by her family. She viewed the outcome as a personal defeat and a limitation on her authority within the household. The message was clear. Her treatment of staff would be monitored and held to higher standards. Word of the queen's decision spread through the royal households within hours. Staff members who had been interviewed during the investigation felt vindicated that their concerns had been taken seriously. There was particular satisfaction that Mrs. Hartwell would not only be protected but promoted in recognition of her years of service. Marcus learned of his fate through a formal meeting with the master of the household. The dual nature of his punishment and recognition reflected the complexity of his situation. He would face consequences for breaking protocol while being acknowledged for his moral courage. The queen wants you to understand, the master explained, that while proper channels must be respected in the future, she appreciates your dedication to protecting those who serve the crown. Your actions, while irregular, highlighted important issues that needed to be addressed. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and continued concern about his future prospects. The formal reprimand would remain on his record, potentially affecting his career advancement. However, the commendation for moral courage was unprecedented and sent a powerful message about the values the royal family truly embraced. The immediate aftermath of the queen's decision created significant tension within Clarence's house. Camilla's anger was palpable, and she made little effort to hide her displeasure with the outcome. Several staff members reported feeling uncomfortable during her interactions with household personnel in the days following the announcement. Prince Charles found himself in the difficult position of implementing the Queen's directives while managing his wife's resentment. He arranged for private conversations with key staff members, attempting to rebuild relationships and restore confidence in household leadership. The changes mandated by the Queen were implemented swiftly. Regular staff meetings were established to provide forums for concerns to be raised and addressed. An anonymous feedback system was created to allow staff members to report problems without fear of retaliation. Training programs were developed for senior royals and household officials on appropriate staff management techniques. Mrs. Hartwell's promotion to senior household advisor was celebrated throughout the palace staff. Her new role included oversight of staff welfare and the authority to investigate complaints about treatment. Her years of experience and respected position made her ideally suited to bridge the gap between management and service personnel. The precedent set by Marcus's case had far-reaching implications beyond the immediate circumstances. For the first time in modern royal history, a guard had successfully challenged the behavior of a senior royal and received support from the highest levels of the monarchy. This established new parameters for the relationship between royals and their staff. Future historians would mark this period as a turning point in royal household management, when the monarchy demonstrated that its commitment to traditional values included protecting the dignity of all those who serve the crown. The courage of one guard had forced an institution to examine its principles and emerge stronger for the challenge. The months following the Queen's decision brought significant changes to the daily operations of the royal households. Marcus Thompson found himself in an unusual position, simultaneously carrying the burden of a formal reprimand while being quietly respected by his colleagues for standing up for Mrs. Hartwell. The contradictory nature of his situation reflected the complex dynamics that had emerged from his unprecedented breach of protocol. Marcus's wife Sarah had supported his decision from the beginning, despite her concerns about their family's financial security. "You couldn't have lived with yourself if you'd just stood by and watched," she told him one evening as they discussed the ongoing changes at work. "Mrs. Hartwell has always been kind to the families of staff members. Remember how she helped organize that collection when Tommy needed his surgery?" Their son Tommy, now 15, had initially been worried about his father's job security. "Dad, are you going to get fired?" he had asked directly. Marcus had explained the situation as best he could to a teenager, emphasizing that sometimes doing the right thing came with risks, but that the values they had taught him required standing up for others when they couldn't protect themselves. The implementation of new household management protocols proceeded under Princess Anne's direct supervision. Her reputation for efficiency and fairness made her ideally suited to oversee the changes, and staff members appreciated her no-nonsense approach to problem-solving. She conducted regular meetings with department heads to ensure that the new policies were being followed consistently across all royal residences. Mrs. Hartwell embraced her new role as senior household advisor with characteristic dignity and determination. Her first initiative was to establish monthly meetings with staff representatives from each department, creating a formal channel for concerns to be raised and addressed before they could escalate into serious problems. "The key," Mrs. Hartwell explained to Marcus during one of their conversations, "is making sure everyone feels heard and valued. People don't expect to agree with every decision, but they do expect to be treated with basic respect and consideration." The anonymous feedback system proved particularly effective, allowing staff members to report problems without fear of retaliation. Princess Anne reviewed each submission personally, investigating concerns thoroughly and taking appropriate action when necessary. The system's success was measured not just in the number of complaints received, but in the declining number of staff resignations and the improved overall morale throughout the households. However, the changes were not implemented without resistance. Camilla continued to struggle with the new limitations on her authority and the increased scrutiny of her interactions with staff members. She complained privately to Charles that she felt like she was being treated as a potential problem rather than a senior member of the royal family. The tension came to a head during preparations for the annual garden party season. These events required extensive coordination between various departments and typically tested the limits of household efficiency. Camilla's frustration with the new protocols became apparent when she attempted to override Mrs. Hartwell's authority regarding catering arrangements. "I don't care what procedures you've established," Camilla told the catering manager during a planning meeting. "I want the menu changed, and I want it done today." Mrs. Hartwell's opinion is irrelevant in this matter. The catering manager, emboldened by the new protections in place, respectfully requested that Mrs. Hartwell be consulted before making such significant changes. This reasonable request triggered an explosive reaction from Camilla, who saw it as further evidence that her authority was being systematically undermined. "How dare you question my instructions?" Camilla shouted. "I am the Duchess of Cornwall, and you will do as I say without involving that interfering old woman in every decision." Unfortunately for Camilla, this outburst occurred within earshot of several other staff members, including Marcus, who was on duty nearby. The incident was quickly reported through the new feedback system, and Princess Anne was notified within hours. The investigation of this new incident was swift and thorough. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Camilla had not only disregarded the established protocols, but had also used derogatory language about Mrs. Hartwell. The pattern of behavior that the previous investigation had sought to address was clearly continuing despite the Queen's explicit instructions. Princess Anne's report to the Queen was direct and uncompromising. "The Duchess has demonstrated that she either cannot or will not modify her behavior toward palace staff. Her recent conduct shows deliberate disregard for the protocols we established and the values they represent." The Queen's response was equally direct. A private meeting was arranged with Camilla, during which Her Majesty made it clear that further incidents would result in more serious consequences, potentially including restriction of her household management responsibilities. I have spent 70 years building relationships based on mutual respect with the people who serve the crown, the Queen told Camilla. I will not allow that foundation to be undermined by anyone, regardless of their position in the family. This royal rebuke had a sobering effect on Camilla, who finally began to understand the seriousness of the situation. The Queen's displeasure was not something that could be dismissed or ignored, and the threat of having her household responsibilities curtailed was particularly concerning for someone who had worked hard to establish her role within the royal family. Prince Charles found himself increasingly isolated as he tried to balance his loyalty to his wife with his duty to his mother and the institution. The stress of the ongoing situation was evident to those who worked closely with him, and several senior advisors expressed concern about the impact on his preparation for eventually becoming king. The resolution of the garden party incident marked a turning point in the entire crisis. Camilla, faced with the real possibility of having her authority formally restricted, finally acknowledged that changes in her approach were necessary. She requested a private meeting with Mrs. Hartwell to discuss how they could work together more effectively. The meeting between Camilla and Mrs. Hartwell was arranged in the private secretary's office, with Princess and present as an observer. Both women approached the discussion with careful formality, understanding that the outcome would significantly influence future household operations. Mrs. Hartwell, Camilla began stiffly. I understand there have been misunderstandings about my expectations regarding staff management. Perhaps we could establish clearer communication protocols going forward. Mrs. Hartwell, with her decades of diplomatic experience, responded graciously while maintaining her dignity. Your Royal Highness, I believe we both want the household to operate efficiently and effectively. I'm confident we can find ways to work together that serve everyone's interests. The conversation that followed was careful and measured, with both women working to establish new boundaries and expectations. Princess Anne's presence ensured that the discussion remained professional and productive, while her occasional questions helped clarify specific protocols and procedures. Over the following weeks, a fragile but functional working relationship developed between Camilla and Mrs. Hartwell. The Duchess made a visible effort to moderate her tone and approach, while Mrs. Hartwell worked to accommodate reasonable requests while maintaining the staff protections that had been established. Marcus observed these changes with cautious optimism. The household atmosphere had definitely improved, though he remained alert to any signs of regression. His position as the guard who had triggered the entire crisis gave him a unique perspective on the ongoing developments. Do you think it will last? David Mitchell asked him one day as they discussed the recent changes. I think it has to last, Marcus replied thoughtfully. Too many people are watching now. The Queen has made her expectations clear, and Princess Anne is making sure they're followed. Camilla knows that any backsliding will have serious consequences. The success of the new protocols began to be noticed beyond the immediate royal households. Other aristocratic families and institutions began inquiring about the staff welfare initiatives, recognizing that similar problems might exist in their own organizations. The royal family's willingness to address these issues publicly sent a strong message about modern expectations for workplace behavior. Mrs. Hartwell's promotion and the protection of staff rights became a model that was studied and potentially replicated elsewhere. Her new position gave her authority to advise other households and institutions on staff management best practices, extending the impact of the changes far beyond the royal residences. The media, initially unaware of the internal crisis, gradually began to pick up hints that significant changes were occurring within the royal households. Careful inquiries by royal correspondents were met with polite but firm responses that emphasized the royal family's ongoing commitment to staff welfare and modernization of household operations. Marcus's role in initiating these changes remained largely unknown to the public, which suited him perfectly. He had never sought recognition for his actions, and was content to continue his duties while knowing that he had helped protect his colleagues from unfair treatment. The training programs for senior royals and household officials proved particularly valuable in preventing future incidents. These sessions, conducted by external experts in workplace management and human resources, provided practical guidance on effective leadership techniques and conflict resolution. Even Camilla participated in these training sessions, though her initial attendance was clearly reluctant. However, as the programs progressed, she began to appreciate the benefits of more effective communication strategies and collaborative management approaches. The most significant long-term impact of the crisis was the establishment of formal protections for palace staff that would outlast any individual royal or household official. The policies and procedures put in place created a framework that would guide royal household management for generations to come. As the first year after the crisis drew to a close, Marcus reflected on the unexpected journey his moment of moral courage had initiated. What began as a spontaneous decision to defend Mrs. Hartwell had evolved into comprehensive reforms that protected hundreds of palace employees and established new standards for royal household management. The precedent set by his actions would influence how future conflicts were handled and ensure that the values of dignity and respect remained central to royal service. Marcus had learned that sometimes the most important thing a person could do was simply stand up for what was right, regardless of the personal cost. 2 years had passed since Marcus Thompson's courageous stand against protocol, and the transformation within the royal households had exceeded everyone's expectations. The changes that began with one guard's defense of Mrs. Hartwell had evolved into a comprehensive modernization of royal staff management that would serve as a template for institutions worldwide. The success of the new protocols was most evident in the dramatic improvement in staff retention rates. Where once experienced servants had been leaving regularly due to hostile working conditions, the royal households now enjoyed remarkable stability. Young people were actually competing for positions that had previously been difficult to fill, drawn by the reputation for fair treatment and professional development opportunities. Marcus had been promoted to senior sergeant, a recognition that acknowledged both his years of faithful service and his role in bringing about positive changes. The promotion came with additional responsibilities for training new guards and ensuring that the values of respect and dignity were understood by all security personnel. The most important thing you need to understand, Marcus told a group of new recruits during one of his training sessions, is that everyone who works here, from the Queen herself to the newest kitchen assistant, deserves to be treated with dignity. Your job is to protect not just the physical security of the royal family, but also the values they represent. Mrs. Hartwell had flourished in her role as senior household advisor, becoming a respected figure whose expertise was sought by institutions far beyond the royal residences. She had developed comprehensive training materials for household management and had been invited to speak at conferences about workplace dignity and staff welfare. The changes we've implemented here prove that traditional institutions can adapt and improve while maintaining their essential character, she explained to a gathering of international household managers. Respect for hierarchy and respect for individuals are not contradictory concepts. Princess Anne's oversight of the transformation had been exemplary, earning her additional recognition as someone who could manage complex organizational changes while maintaining institutional stability. Her direct approach and commitment to fairness had been crucial in ensuring that the new policies were implemented effectively and consistently. The Queen, despite her advancing age, had remained actively involved in monitoring the progress of the reforms. Her personal interest in staff welfare had been a powerful motivating factor for everyone involved in implementing the changes. Regular reports on household morale and staff satisfaction became part of her weekly briefings. Prince Charles had gradually come to appreciate the benefits of the new approach to household management. Initially resistant to changes that seemed to question his wife's authority, he had observed how the improved working environment actually made his own duties easier and more pleasant. Staff members were more engaged and proactive when they felt valued and respected. The most significant change had occurred in Camilla herself. The Duchess of Cornwall had undergone a genuine transformation in her approach to staff management, moving from confrontational authoritarianism to collaborative leadership. This change had not been easy or immediate, but it had been genuine and lasting. The turning point for Camilla had come during the training sessions led by organizational development experts. Initially skeptical about the need for such programs, she had gradually come to understand how her communication style had been perceived by staff members and the negative impact it had been having on household operations. "I never realized how my words were affecting people," she confided to Charles after one particularly enlightening session. "I thought I was being firm and decisive, but I can see now that I was being unnecessarily harsh and dismissive." Her efforts to change had been noticed and appreciated by the staff, many of whom had been willing to give her a second chance once they saw a genuine commitment to improvement. The relationship between Camilla and Mrs. Hartwell had evolved into one of mutual respect and effective collaboration. The success story had attracted attention from management experts and organizational psychologists who saw the royal household transformation as a case study in successful institutional change. Academic papers were written about the process, examining how traditional hierarchical organizations could modernize their practices while maintaining their essential character. Media coverage of the changes had been universally positive, with royal correspondents noting the improved atmosphere during public events and the obvious satisfaction of staff members. The royal family's willingness to address internal issues and implement meaningful reforms had actually enhanced their public reputation rather than damaging it. Marcus's family had benefited from his increased standing within the organization. Sarah had been offered a position in the royal household's new staff welfare department, using her background in social work to help implement support programs for employees and their families. Their children took pride in their father's role in bringing about positive changes that helped so many people. The ripple effects of the transformation extended far beyond the royal households themselves. Other prestigious institutions, from universities to major corporations, began examining their own staff management practices and implementing similar reforms. The concept of protecting staff dignity while maintaining operational excellence became a standard topic in management training programs. International recognition of the success came when Mrs. Hartwell was awarded an honorary degree by a leading university for her contributions to workplace dignity and institutional reform. Her acceptance speech, attended by representatives from organizations worldwide, emphasized that respect for all individuals was not just morally right, but also practically beneficial. When people feel valued and respected, they give their best effort, she told the audience. This isn't just about being kind, though kindness is important. It's about creating environments where everyone can contribute their talents effectively. The new protocols had also created opportunities for career advancement that hadn't existed before. Staff members were encouraged to pursue additional training and education, with the royal household providing support for professional development. Several long-serving employees had been promoted to positions of greater responsibility and authority. The anonymous feedback system had evolved into a comprehensive communication network that allowed concerns to be addressed quickly and effectively. Regular surveys measured staff satisfaction and identified areas for continued improvement. The data showed consistent improvement across all measures of workplace quality. Marcus's original intervention had been vindicated in ways he never could have imagined. What had seemed like a career-ending breach of protocol had instead catalyzed changes that improved the lives of hundreds of people and strengthened the institution he had served for decades. The Queen's decision to support Marcus's moral courage while addressing his breach of protocol had proven to be a masterful balance of justice and institutional stability. Her wisdom in recognizing that protecting staff welfare was essential to the monarchy's long-term success had guided the entire transformation process. As Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The moment when he had stepped forward to defend Mrs. Hartwell had been instinctive, driven by his fundamental sense of right and wrong rather than any calculation of consequences. The annual staff appreciation ceremony that had been instituted as part of the reforms provided a formal opportunity to recognize the contributions of palace employees. The Queen personally presented awards to staff members who had demonstrated exceptional service, making it clear that their work was valued and appreciated. During the most recent ceremony, Marcus had been surprised to receive a special recognition for his exceptional moral courage in upholding the values of dignity and respect that define service to the crown. The Queen's personal presentation of the award, accompanied by warm words of appreciation, had been one of the most meaningful moments of his career. Mrs. Hartwell had also received recognition at the ceremony, being appointed as a member of the Royal Victorian Order for her distinguished service and contributions to staff welfare. The honor was particularly meaningful because it acknowledged not just her years of faithful service, but also her role in helping to modernize royal household management. The transformation of the royal households had become a model for how traditional institutions could adapt to modern expectations while maintaining their essential character and values. The success demonstrated that hierarchy and respect for individual dignity were not incompatible, but could actually reinforce each other when properly balanced. Future historians would mark this period as a significant milestone in the evolution of the modern monarchy, when the institution demonstrated its ability to address internal challenges honestly and implement meaningful reforms. The courage of one guard and the wisdom of the queen had combined to create lasting positive change. Marcus continued his duties with renewed pride in the institution he served, knowing that his moment of moral courage had contributed to making the royal households places where everyone could work with dignity and respect. The precedent established by his actions would protect future generations of palace staff and ensure that the values of fairness and justice remained central to royal service. The story of Sergeant Marcus Thompson's brave stand had become part of royal household lore, passed down to new employees as an example of how individual courage could create positive change even within the most traditional institutions. His legacy would endure long after his retirement, inspiring others to speak up for what was right regardless of the personal cost. In the end, Marcus had learned that true loyalty to an institution sometimes required challenging its practices to help it live up to its highest values. His willingness to risk his career to protect a colleague had not only saved Mrs. Hartwell from humiliation, but had also strengthened the monarchy itself by forcing it to examine and improve its treatment of those who served it most faithfully.